Hi, folks, and welcome to another episode of Atom or A Touch of Multiplatform. My name is Pamela Hill, and I'm a developer advocate at JetBrains. We're here with Josh Shin from Volley to talk about their adventures with Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile today. But first, time for our awkward host confessions. As we were preparing for this episode, we learned that Josh never turns down the opportunity for some karaoke. So my confession is that I've never actually karaoke'd before. Justin, why don't you introduce yourself and then Josh?
I did see Josh say that, and I can't believe you brought it up. I am awful at karaoke. I shouldn't be doing karaoke, but it is fun. I should get better at it, is what I really should do. I'm Justin from Touchlab, and I'm really glad to have Josh here today. Josh, you could say something general about karaoke, but I am curious specifically, like what kinds of songs and artists you enjoy singing to.
Wow. First, I want to say thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here. And then, so with the karaoke thing, I am Korean American, and Koreans love karaoke. And it's not like the American kind where it's like you're in a bar in front of everyone, it's private room. So it's like when you ask like what kinds of songs, it's like, well, what's the mood, you know? Like, are you starting the evening? Are you ramping up? You gotta have a whole repertoire. And I gotta say, I'm not good at karaoke. I'm not a good singer, but I commit. Some yeah. So
And
some
Josh,
some
you've got a
oh
friend at the back. Won't you
this
introduce him, her, or they? Yes.
this is Suzu. I set up this chair here for today because otherwise she'd be in my lap and it'd be very distracting.
Yeah.
Can you
Good
say hi,
call.
Suzu? Okay, I think
Oh.
that's the best we're getting.
That
Thank you
is a cat.
for setting
Hello.
it up. So Josh, how did you get started as a mobile developer?
So, funny story. I got started because I used to teach ESL, English as a second language, but I I was in this Uber ride and I was talking with this driver who is working in banking but getting back into software development, and he referred me to a mobile boot camp. So that's how I got started. I went to boot camp, and then later my TA from the boot camp uh, helped me get my first job, or my second job actually. But worked with them. So I worked at Capital One for a while as an Android developer, and then here at Volley as a Android and iOS developer.
The Uber driver didn't go to that same boot camp, did they?
He did, but he didn't take the mobile course there.
So mobile is the real job to get into. You
Yeah.
you've so you've been at Volley for quite a while. What does Volley do as a company?
Great question. I let's see here. I prepared this. No, I'm kidding. So Volley, so Volley works where the leading creator of voice-controlled games. We have popular games like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Jeopardy, Song Quiz on like smart speaker devices, and then we're working on. We've released a new game for mobile, Face Off, which is a video chat app that also has games inside of it. So it's sort of like a hub for different games as well. And it also features voice controls and voice recognition for the gameplay.
Very cool. When you got into mobile, did you already were thinking about like voice sort of stuff, or what were you thinking when you got into mobile? What kind of things you were going to do?
So I wasn't thinking of voice enabled stuff really. I was just thinking of, well, the thing that drew me to mobile was the like just the interesting set of challenges on mobile as opposed to desktop. It was like like just more constraints with resources and whatnot, and like just like having to think about like multi-threading, and so that like the sort of technical challenges really drew me to mobile. And then as far as that goes, like what drew me to it wasn't so much the voice interaction as like the challenges with making games that drew me to Volley.
Very cool.
So, how has Volley invested in using technologies such as Kotlin Multiplatform Mobile to reach its goals?
So, Volley has invested pretty heavily in it. I'd say it's kind of central to our mobile strategy. Um, because when I signed up at Volley, I was like the sole mobile developer and trying to not reinvent the wheel for both platforms, and so really trying to share as much code as possible. So that has carried on to the Face Off app as well, where we are trying to we're leveraging like sharing the data models, networking, and business logic, and all the way up to the view model layer. And that I think is where like a huge payoff is, because when I was doing uh, when I was a sole developer on two platforms, I found that that's where a lot of the copying and pasting was.
Mhm. Yeah, we often hear that the common use case for Kotlin multi-platform is, as you mentioned, networking. But there's actually quite a lot of things that you have to do in order to get that whole layer in place, and you can't do that in a day. Is there something that you have in mind, a practical example of a use case that somebody can get started with Kotlin multi-platform mobile just in a day?
In a day,
Something small.
well, um, like if you want to get started in a day, I would actually I would recommend the TouchLab library KampKit, because that's sort of like that's what we use at Volley, and it was a great example of seeing like just setting something up really quickly and seeing how it interacts with both platforms up to the view model layer. Um, and then, it makes network calls. Like what we did actually was we just kind of updated the 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 networking components in there to hit our own APIs, get the payloads, and then like that's basically how we got up and running.
I'm glad that worked out so well for you. Yeah, we released KampKit in early 2020. Um, and that was exactly what we had in mind. We wanted an easy thing for people to get started and start putting in their own stuff, not just a hello world and you don't know what to do next. So I'm glad you are continuing to, or you were able to use that. And we do see people continue, like as they adopt Kotlin multi-platform, since it's in beta now. New people are joining and they still get value out of that. We're so proud of that.
I I really gotta say thank you for CampKit, because it like in the early days too, there just wasn't a lot of documentation, and getting started was difficult and not too intuitive, and it provided a great blueprint. And also just like great sort of library recommendations in there, and seeing like what we could use to share logic.
Now, when you were looking into Kotlin multi-platform mobile, um, and then the decision to invest more heavily in it at Volley happened, like was that more of a top-down or a bottom-up decision, or maybe even in
So
between?
it was in between, actually, I'd say, because one of the what drew me to Volley was that um, they would let me experiment with KMM, because I had had some friends who were working at companies using it, and I heard about all the things they were doing, and it really intrigued me. And then the VP of engineering here at Volley, Aaron Sarrazin, he reached out to me, and then we were talking, and he was telling me how he wanted to use KMM, and I was like, this totally aligns with what I'm interested in. Let's do it. And in the early days, it was pretty cutting edge. So it was like you had to know what you were signing up for, because it like the it there were a lot of challenges. It wasn't easy, but you really had to be very enthusiastic about it, like about being there early and figuring this out.
You mentioned there were two apps that you're working on now, or you started on one and you're doing a new one. Did they have the same path towards Kotlin multi-platform?
So yeah, so like in the beginning, I'd say that we were like top down, bottom up, it was equal. And then as we expanded, it was more like we've started with this decision in place, and like whoever joins is has to know what they're signing up for. So it was like with the first app I worked on, Volley FM, it was originally in two different code bases, and then there was a rewrite, and we rewrote it in Kotlin Multiplatform. And then for the second app, Face Off, it started as an iOS R&D project, and then we brought in the Android team with the thoughts of doing it KMM. And then through that, we were migrating the iOS code to the shared code. But as we were hiring new developers, it was like, this is the strategy we've got in place. Like we really focus on who is interested in this. Like we recently hired a new iOS developer, and it was like very much like at the beginning, like here's a major caveat, like we're using Kotlin multi-platform, like this is like there's no stopping this train. And then so we really had to find people interested in learn like learning another platform, learning another language, people who are interested in being polyglots.
No stopping the KMM train. It's interesting because KMM is like from its beginnings and its foundations, it's optional. Like you can use as much or as little as you want. It's not an all-in-one solution where once you make that decision, you're like stuck with it. But when people do use KMM, they start seeing the benefits and forgive the warts, and it continues to keep getting better. And it is cool how like so many people we talk to, they start that train and it just keeps going. Um, I wanted to zoom in on that iOS first app. That's it's a bit unusual for an iOS app to
Yeah.
start where it is and then go into sharing code. What what would your advice be for like folks approaching shared code from iOS to Android?
So my advice is kind of like what you said, that KMM is sort of optional. You choose your level of engagement. We definitely started like, okay, this is not going to happen overnight. Like incremental changes. Let's see what we can do. And the first step of it was sharing data models. And then we also, this was just like kind of a no-brainer for us, because we also have we share data models with the backend via a transpiler that just going to plug this really quickly. Like at Volley, we created a transpiler that transpiles TypeScript to Kotlin. And so we're able to ensure that contract between the backend and the client. And so it was a no-brainer to use that, and then share the types in Kotlin uh, across Android and iOS. And then from there, it was like, all right, we've got the data models, the serialization. Now let's go to networking. And then it's like, okay, let's bring in different services. We brought in we migrated to a shared call manager, because our app is also a video chat app with a lot of call logic. And that is something where, again, that was a no-brainer, because it was like, as you're developing on like each platform, what ends up happening is like people tend to like get like laser focused on what they're working on, and like they sort of forget to like communicate like, hey, did you encounter this? Like, did you encounter that? Because what I would see in PR reviews, it's like people trying to tackle the same problems. And so it was like definitely a no-brainer, because it was like because iOS was first, like we'd already learned all those terrible lessons, like all the edge cases. So it was like we worked on the shared class for the call logic, and it was like, here, like we've like we found all these edge cases for you. Like, please take this.
So you're talking about a library that you created, the transpiler that you created. Is that Martok? I don't know how you pronounce it. Sorry.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's called Martok. And because our backend is at the company is TypeScript. Most of our developers are TypeScript developers. There's a lot of love for TypeScript, so it's like there's no changing that. And then also, um, like the same, I look at TypeScript and I think like it's kind of black magic, like with the union types and all that. I'm like, like, all right, that's cool if you're into it. But uh, the cool thing about transpiling the TypeScript into Kotlin is those union types could be represented as sealed classes. So that's huge. Just because like in, encapsulating what we're looking for, like with sealed classes, and then like being able to use switch statements, and then also Kotlin X updated their serializer to have a polymorphic serializer. So like that just really opened things up with us, like with what we could do, and like um, how we could like move the different types across the app, and like treating them as their base type. It was like, as it was happening, it was like really exciting and cool to see like, oh, like this is what it's capable, like we're able to sort of leverage like the coolest parts of Kotlin here.
It's amazing. So you were talking about before we sort of switched to Martok, we were talking about your iOS first approach and using KMM. What did you find worked for your team, and what did not work for your team?
So we're still pretty we're still pretty new to this, like, because like I think I mentioned that we started hiring like as we were working on the app, and so just onboarding to KMM is a long process, I think. Or like they're like the more complicated the app, the longer onboarding. And so uh um like one of the problems that we're seeing now is the sort of knowledge silo. Just like taking people to like getting people to ramp up takes a while, and so what happens is like, just one person ends up working on a lot of things. Um, and so that's something where we're working to correct. Another thing is uh, I wish, or like the fact that we were iOS first and then migrating to shared, it's it's much harder, because if you're on the same page immediately, like you kind of see the benefits immediately. And so like the like one of the downsides was like just keeping the platforms aligned, like Android's doing its thing, iOS is doing its thing. There's just less communication, like the shared code gets a little um, uh, shared code starts to feel neglected, and so
Mm,
like
Still.
that, yeah. And so that was one of the things that was like difficult. As far as the things that worked, it's like when you saw the benefits, you really saw the benefits. Like being able to just uh, hand over a class, like hand over work and be like, hey, it's done, just take this, is huge. And then things like developers, like our Android app started much later than the iOS app, but our junior Android developer got to see his code in production before Android launched because it was released in the iOS app. Uh, so there's excitement about like seeing your code on different platforms too, just like knowing your code has bigger reach. Um, and then I feel like the aha moment for the team was during the hackathon. Like we had this company hackathon here, and it was to the team's project was to create a new game. And so this is where you're under a time crunch, like really got to think about how you're splitting up the work, and they really saw the benefits because it was we had a backend engineer, uh, three mobile engineers. One person worked on all the shared code, the view model logic. The other two worked on the UI for each platform, and they were really able to see how quickly they could move on
Mhm.
both platforms together.
Mhm.
The
I want
oh, go ahead, Pamela.
Sorry, I wanted to ask about knowledge silos. How do you actually get away from how are you planning or how are you thinking you're going to get away from having these knowledge silos?
So, yeah, with as far as Android goes, KMM's pretty easy because they know Android Studio, they know how to navigate all the different modules. It's pretty easy to figure out. On the iOS side, it's just much more like the barrier of entry is higher, just because or the bar of entry is higher. Like learning a new IDE is daunting, uh, scary, and so the plan the plan for onboarding our new iOS engineer is basically we spent uh, uh, like a month and a half just getting familiar with the code base first, just the iOS side. Just get in there, get your feet wet, figure it out, and then next up is sort of that incremental step of migrating the iOS code base to shared. We're gonna kind of follow that same trajectory of go let's here are the share types we're using. Here's the networking, and then teaching about Kotlin basically. Here are seal classes, data classes, and then the next step here is learning about suspend functions, learning about flows, and then getting them into the view models and integrating some existing view models, creating their own view models. That's the plan so far.
Okay, so it's very collaborative.
Mhm. And if you were to do this again with another team, or if you're giving advice to a team who's going through this, would you recommend that same order of operations, or do you think there could be other ways to get started and help iOS developers acclimate to the environment and new IDs and all this stuff?
So I guess it depends because it depends on the team and what their situation is. If it's a migration, I would say I think this way works. Otherwise, I'd say I'm not sure because like I think it would have been really cool if I starting this journey if I were if I had someone else to collaborate with. I think that would have been super cool, bounce ideas off of. And then if like like just having more people with that shared knowledge, I think it would be easier to disperse it as well. And then I also definitely think that starting off on the same page is much easier because then you've got that communication and collaboration up front. You're and you see the benefits much faster.
Okay. What kind of architectures do your apps have? You mentioned in your interest that MVI was a particular passion. So what kind of architectures do you think works really well with KMM or not so great with KMM?
So, yeah, with like, well, again, one of the things that drew me to KMM was also the fact that it was like shared code, but not at the UI layer. That was a huge draw because like all the other cross-platform tools seem to share UI, and also it seemed like the UI bugs were the most difficult to debug. And so like that separation of concerns to me was like uh, a big a big draw. I was like, I loved how things were separated. That made so much sense to me. And so like I think that with KMM, like as far as what architectures work, I love sharing view models. I think it's great. So like anything through the view model layer, because like again, as I worked on before doing KMM and working on two platforms with separate code bases, uh, I found like the view models were the most frustrating because it was like, I've already done this. Like I'm really just copying and pasting code.
Mm.
And are you using MVI in the Face-Off app, or?
Yes. Yeah. We're using MVI. I like MVI a lot. It's got the unidirectional data flow. But then also it seems like uh very it's like the like because some other things seem like there's just more they're a bit more complicated, and so MBI I think is like a, a like a simple thing to integrate, and it's very like more adaptable to needs.
I've seen a few different open source solutions or frameworks towards like using MVI within a Kotlin multi-platform context. Did you use any of those? Did you roll your own?
So we didn't we rolled our own. We basically have like this base sort of common view model that it's easy to like to integrate on like we use the like we've got this common view model that's easy to integrate on the Android side because like the Android view models are just a wrapper around it. And then like on the iOS side, we use them directly. Um, and like that's worked really well for us. We haven't really needed to look at too many libraries. I am really curious though, because like we did some early experiments with Swift UI, and just converting flows to combine was required a lot of boilerplate for us. And so we're definitely interested in libraries that will like make that process easier for us.
Mhm.
Everybody wants better interop with Swift and all the various things that are happening over in that world of Apple. Yeah, JetBrains, of course, will always be looking into that. In the meantime, TouchLab is working on something that can help with that
All
sort of
right.
interop, and the community has there's other solutions too. So
Yes,
we'll
yes.
definitely talk to you, and if there's people in the comments who also care about this kind of thing. Question from Josh. working at working at between those different layers. It is definitely an interesting problem because people keep wanting to push more and more to that shared layer, and you start running into more issues, which have not been solved yet. So it's really interesting how people are solving this and where they're pushing the technology. Um, there's other things, limitations to the technology that I remember you ran into with like multiple frameworks. Um, how have you dealt with that? Are there any other things that you've run into that you've had to figure out?
Yeah, so with the multiple frameworks, that's also because we're a smaller company, and we like we started out. Uh, like in the early days, especially, like I was very scared to modularize just because like the compilation process was complicated and difficult. I remember like getting error, like the figuring out debug symbol linking was really difficult for our error reporting, and like figuring out, okay, like do I like can I fix this if it's a static framework instead of dynamic? So that left some scars on me initially. So we kind of held off on like modularizing the app because we figured like small app, like we can get away with it for now. But as it matured, it became apparent like we need to modularize. And so the big difficulty we're running into is um, like if we're separating things into different frameworks, uh, consuming that on the iOS side, we can't share the types across the different frameworks. And so what we've done is we're doing a fat framework like that, like we're bringing the modules and then creating a framework from that one. And so that is fine for now, but it would be great like if we could reduce build times by having like being able to import like to truly modularize with different frameworks. I am very open to suggestions in the comments. Any tips there would be appreciated.
I'm curious if you know about the Mobile Native Foundation.
No.
No. So it was started by a bunch of people in larger companies that look at mobile development at scale. Kotlin Multiplatform shows up a couple times in there, but it's not where most of the discussions are. It could be another place to ask questions about scaling with Kotlin Multiplatform and what they might be doing with it. Yeah, TouchLab checks out what discussions are happening over there all the time. It's a really cool community. And also the Kotlinlang Slack, I'm sure you're aware of, that JetBrains runs. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Always good questions in there.
I hop in there a lot. I appreciate all the help I get there. Just uh, shout out to the TouchLab people. They're usually the first ones on the scene. Greatly appreciate their help in there.
So Kotlin Conf is coming up, or already happened, depending on when you're watching this, and it's for Kotlin, and Kotlin Multiplatform is part of it, and KMM is part of that. So it starts going a few levels deep. If there was like a KMM only conference, what sort of topics would you want to learn more about?
I would love to hear more from the iOS side because, like, generally with KMM, you hear about you hear from Android developers. I'd love to hear more from iOS developers, just like the individual stories and journeys, and then also like I am very curious to hear about like different teams, different size companies integrating KMM and seeing how it looks for everyone. Because uh, like yeah, I like because all like with us, we're like a small company. I think it's like we're kind of an odd situation, but I like I'd love to hear more stories like this where it's like like a company you wouldn't expect.
Yes. Well, that's it for tonight, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. Josh, thank you so much for being the perfect guest. Thank you, Susu, for hanging out with us. And have a lovely evening. Or wherever you are, have a lovely day.
Thank you so much for
Bye.
having me. It's been a pleasure.
It's been great. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.